Hello, I'm Terry Meer, and I'll be your host today. We at Sustainable Kashi are proud to provide these free classes every week to help you connect us with our ecosystem and each other. Feel free to learn more about our project at sustainablekashi.com. And we have an amazing panel with us that includes Shanti Pierce, Jeff Trapani, and Greg Noonan. Uh, Shanti Pierce is the owner of Bamboo Leaf Tea and a quality bamboo specialist. She was born in India and moved to Florida to work on the Animal Kingdom project for Disney. We're very happy to have her here with us. Thank you for coming. Jeff Trapani is a virtual science educator and the educational director at Orlando Permaculture. He has been an inspiration and has taught at several of my permaculture design courses, and it's wonderful to have you here, Jeff. Thank you for taking time. And Greg Noonan is the owner of Connected Landscapes. This is an urban design company which does wonderful work helping people grow food and turn landscapes into edible lawns. So thank you so much for that work you do. He's also a horticulturist at Universal Studios, which sounds just like an amazing job making dreams come true. Thank you, Greg, for taking time to be with us here today. If you have any questions, please type them in the chat box and we'll try to get them answered either in our Facebook community group or at the end of our panel. So we'll start by saying thank you everyone for being here. And I'm gonna field the questions and moderate questions for you that I would love to hear your opinions on your expertise and share them with us. So first of all, I'll just say, what is your definition of resiliency? And we'll start with Jeff.
All right, I love this question. I think that one of the things over the past several years that many of us have been focusing on is sustainability and just understanding the difference between the two. And resiliency, well, sustainability is just trying to keep things going at the same, just trying to sustain what you have in terms of the agricultural system. We don't want to sustain that. In terms of, the food system, we don't want to sustain that, or the lawns that are chemical intensive, fertilizer intensive, we don't want to sustain that. So the idea of resiliency to me is just trying to redesign, recreate these systems so that we can have regenerative systems in our yards or in our communities. And in that respect, as far as resiliency goes, the ability to bounce back. If there's any type of stressor, any type of shock that you get in your home, your family, your community, the ability to be able to just handle that and do it with ease. And when it comes to water that's coming down on your house, you have a water system and you're able to channel that, give it to your trees and have it for your home. In terms of energy bouncing off your roof, having way in your yard, having ways to capture it with plants and trees or solar panels. And no matter what comes, you still have that energy, that food, that water for yourself and your community. So that's how I think of it. And that's largely what I do. And I try to help people with becoming more resilient in their lives.
Wonderful. Shanti, would you like to share your thoughts on resiliency?
Hi, I'm so happy to be here. Thank you so much. So I feel like resiliency is like, it's something that's it covers every single aspect of our lives, right? And once you start looking at one aspect of your life that feels maybe stagnant or something that just really, like Jeff said, doesn't move, right? It doesn't flow. We always want this ability to adapt and change. And as everybody knows from what we've been seeing just in our lifetime, let alone our parents' lifetime or things like that, how many different things we need to just be able to adapt and change to, adapt and change to, adapt and change to. It's what humans are really, really good at. This is why there's so many of us, because we're super amazing at doing this. And we just need to take that amazing ability that we have and focus it a little bit better on change, giving that back to our environment that we've been kind of just taking from. We haven't had as much of that ebb and flow of giving and taking and giving and taking. We've just been taking. And part of being able to sustain resiliency for me is about moving in a direction where we have a consciousness around that adaptability in our environment and what we're giving back to it, and being able to put all those pieces together so that we're not just taking for our own resiliency, but we're also giving for the resiliency around us. Because if we have resiliency, that's just not enough. We also need this collective resiliency in order to move in the direction that we need to go. And I think that's really kind of what's coming into a lot of people's consciousnness over this last year, who really never thought of things that way, which is a beautiful thing to see. And so we just need to keep going in that direction. But it's a really important thing. It's something that I talk about a lot with bamboo, because it has this ability to just be so giving. But yet when it comes down to it, it's like, here's the line. I'm your boundary. You're not going any further. That's enough. And that's like a beautiful thing, right? We need those boundaries, and we need to be able to adapt and change. So it's like all of that together in our emotional, spiritual, physical, all those elements that come together.
Beautiful. I really love the way you brought edges and shaping the diversity of the landscape into the culture. So thank you very much for bringing bamboo into the conversation. Greg, what is your definition of resiliency?
Well, I just want to say I yield the floor. That was such a good answer. Yeah. Thank you also for having us here and having the conversation. Yeah, I mean, I think Shanti and Jeff kind of touched on everything that I'd say. That idea of adaptation, the idea of giving and getting, and kind of having that be cyclical, and talking about this last year where things kind of became increasingly segregated and increasingly isolated. For me, I think that resiliency is a sort of a measurement of how interconnected you are to your environment, to the people around you. And the more that we kind of acknowledge the interconnectivity of the systems that we're a part of, the more resilient we become. I just started rereading The Origin of Species because I realized that I had never actually read it. That's one of those things that's fairly important if you're interested in ecology, is like the foundation of the whole sort of theory. And growing up, I'd always heard, it's the competition, it's the survival of the fittest. It's, our understanding of nature is kind of this endless struggle. And what's really interesting is that when you actually read The Origin of Species, like what Darwin was really hyper-focused on through that whole book is survival of the fittest is mostly an expression of how good you are occupying a niche and then supporting all the things around you that are also occupying their own niches. And it's about adaptation more than it is about this kind of dominance, right? So I think resiliency is more about, like kind of recognizing what you can give back versus how you can extract, to Shanti's point.
Beautiful, thank you. And I look forward to reading that. I'd like to ask my next question on the strength of resiliency. And I believe that resiliency is such a wonderful way to really bring out the strength of a community or an ecosystem. So I'd like to ask you, what are some of your biggest failures, things you've tried to do and have completely failed at? And I believe that can help us understand the strength within resiliency. So Shanti, would you like to share with us some of your failures?
Oh my gosh, I love this one so much. So being a parent, being in relationships, I think we can all relate to like the things where you just kick yourself and wish you had done it differently. And yet, that is what being human is, right? We are human. And so the conversations I often have with my kids, especially now that they're older, is like, look, you have every right to like be angry about something I did in the past or whatever, because I haven't done this before. that I remember. So, and we make mistakes, and that's what we are. We're human. We make mistakes, and that's what's so amazingly beautiful about us, is like, we're so flawed. Like, to me, some of the things that I love most about people is like those quirky, really flawed things about them. Like, that's just, I love that because it makes them who they are, right? Like, it's who we are, like those things, those challenges that we have to do. So I would say like my biggest ones are definitely along parenting and relationships, because those are our most intense learning experiences. Of course, there's been business things and like planting things in the wrong place or whatever, but those are fun little things we do along the way too, and they're kind of easier to fix.
Sounds like you have an impressive list. Greg, would you like to share with us your biggest failure in which you've been taught the lessons of resiliency?
Yeah, sure. I mean, it kind of speaks to what we were just talking about. I think my biggest weakness has and continues to be sort of wanting to do everything myself and being both afraid and reluctant and kind of resentful towards asking for help and trying to be more interfaced with people. I mean, this past year, right, starting Connected Landscapes and having a business that was doing well, coming to a place where for a variety of reasons, things weren't going as well, and then having to find a job to fall back on. I think a lot of that is a consequence of me not relying more on a resilient community and sort of always wanting to kind of just come back to me, right? Like I think kind of decreasing that ego and thinking, how can you be of service versus how can I just get what I want? That's sort of my constant 30-year-long lesson that I learn and repeatedly forget and then have to relearn in increasingly uncomfortable ways.
Thank you for sharing that. Jeff, could you share with us your experience?
Well, I love failure. It's my greatest teacher, and it's through the dysfunction in my life that I've learned and I've shaped who I am. So I recently saw a news headline with Elon Musk, and the rocket went up, came down, it crashed, and he celebrated the success because of all of the data he was able to collect in the landing and how he was able to use that for the next launch. He expected it to probably crash. And so there's so much data, there's so much information that I get when I fail at something. And I would say I'm along the sentiment with Greg as far as connecting with the community. We talk about integrating all these different systems of food and energy and waste and so on, but one of the most important systems we have to learn to integrate with all of our designs is the human system. And every one of us has a type of efficiency of what they do really well, what they love to do, the things that get them up in the morning and keep them up late at night. And we have to figure out, how do we create this community network where we're integrating these people who love doing these things. It's not just about getting the worms because they do such a great job at composting, or getting a moringa tree because it grows so quickly and it can shade an area. Whatever the case may be, we have to just try to get all of those components together. And for me, one of the things I talk to people the most about with permaculture and where their frustrations are is the amount of time and energy it takes for them to do things. And then when we have these permaculture action days with Orlando Permaculture, we can see how quickly things can be done in just a few hours. And now we got plenty of time to go over another person's house and help them with their project. And we learn so much and we have so much fun doing it as a community that's one thing that I wish I was able to do more of where I was before. And it's just something that I'm just becoming more aware of that I have to do in the future with my place and as a group with Orlando Permaculture, just trying to figure out ways to get people together and work better to help everyone out.
Beautiful. Thank you for sharing all of your thoughts on that resiliency. So I see each of you as leaders in permaculture and resiliency in your own fields, either in the community or in building ecosystems. So I'd like to ask you, how would you suggest people get started on creating a more resilient life? And Greg, I'd like to start with you.
I'd say probably just shred all your credit cards, move to the woods. No, I'm just kidding. So one thing that I said, I think the last time I did a Kashi talk, the thing that I said was meet your neighbors. And so since then, my fiance and I have bought a house and moved into a neighborhood. And that was kind of my highest priority. It was like, all right, well, let me practice what I preach here and meet my neighbors. It's been super transformative because our neighbors are like super into homesteading the way that we are, and we've been able to support each other in all these super cool ways. Like the guy that lives next door is a carpenter, so he's helping me design and build like pergolas and trellises for clients, and we're swapping plants and everything. I think if you want to start building your own kind of sense of resiliency and regenerative, I do think it starts with a mindset shift, which isn't, like it's easy to kind of go and buy longevity spinaches or whatever kind of permaculturally plants and then kind of be like, well, I'm being regenerative and sustainable now. But in terms of like carbon and water and all that kind of stuff, really that doesn't really matter at all. Like it's almost inconsequential. The thing that ends up being way more revolutionary and kind of way more radical is taking a second to assess in yourself, like what ways am I not being sustainable? Like what ways am I not being resilient? Like where are the problems? And it's probably not necessarily trips to the grocery store. It's probably a broader mindset shift. I know that is always the case for me. So it's like finding those problems, or not even problems, but those like opportunities, those potentials for plugging gaps in your network and kind of meeting other people and having that internal shift. And I think those things just sort of naturally beget collecting rainwater and gardening and all those kinds of stuff. But if I think it starts with that internal landscape versus going straight out into your yard and kind of tearing up your grass and putting down mulch.
Beautiful. Jeff, how would you recommend people get started on a pathway towards resiliency?
I would take a look at your life and think about things in terms of time, energy, and resources, and where you are putting those things right now. And look at the things in your life that you value the most. For me, since having twins and moving into a new home and having all these new responsibilities, I'm actually more efficient at what I do right now than I did in the past. And that's because I've learned how to organize my time, and I organize my day at work. I have a schedule for family. I have certain family days. I have hours during the day where I'm doing things. And I'm noticing that there's a lot of inefficiencies that I had in the past, a lot of wasted time, energy, money that's going into things that don't align with the most important things. So I pick my values. What do I value the most? And I try to create the most efficient system for doing that. And most people, they don't think about their life and their time in terms of systems. There's inputs and outputs. And a lot of the outputs, they should be inputs to another valuable input to things. And so when I look at it from a system approach, I look at, and it doesn't matter if you grow food or whatever you do, you want to think of it in terms of efficiency and how can you integrate more regenerative designs. It can be a more regenerative mindset, the way you look at things. It can be the little habits that you have that you might have to break and incorporate new processes for doing things. And so that's how I became more resilient, and is with these new approaches that I've taken in my day. Being more organized, looking at things. What's the quality of your food? You think about resiliency of the ecosystem, the planet. What about your health? How much time do you spend being sick or having aches and pains and different things? So you gotta look at it as a healthy system. A resilient system is one that just operates really well, right? And the more that it operates well, the more efficient it's going to be, the more time you're going to have to handle. And that's the thing. People are putting too much of their time, energy, resources into things that really don't align with their values. And if they're able to find more ways to do it, and you can focus more on the most important things at home, it's amazing how many problems are just going to go away.
Beautiful. I love the way you bring connection as the solution. And yes, I completely agree. The more our health and our economy and our landscapes are connected, the more resilient we'll be to the unknown things that arise. Shanti, would you like to share your advice?
Well, let's share my experience. How's that? Maybe it's the same thing. I'm going to speak from a single mom's perspective of going through life, which, there's a lot of single parents out there, and just parents in general, is that I like to make lists either in my head or like write them down. And I think the most important things are like, what are the things that are making me feel unsafe? What are the things that are making me just kind of halt me in my progress forward and like stopping me in my tracks and not allowing me to do either like on the path that I was going for one reason or another? And so like for me, some of the things that have come up in the past are things like repairing things, right? We have a house, things break, that, like whatever, I try and do the best I can, but I can't always fix things. And this resiliency of being able to have, one of the things I love is like living where I've lived for 23 years. Like I have a community of people that I can call on, I need help with this, I need help with that, and also like in the realm of farming too, like I have people I know, like I would like to buy this from you, or I would like to buy that from you. So really, like for me, one of the key factors of making me feel safe has been to set up those systems, like Jeff talked about, is set up those systems that allow me so that when something happens, it doesn't stop me from progressing what I'm doing on the path I'm doing and make me veer off this way, because I have those systems in place. And sometimes when life gets really, really hard, we need those systems in place so that all we have to do is walk through that day. And there's been many times in my life where it was like, I just have to walk through this until I can do something else. And that's been really important, to set those up pre-meltdown phase of whatever it is that life is sending you, and be able to say, okay, it's okay if for 6 months, all I do is walk through everything that I've set up in place. And I just walk through my walk, and I walk through my walk, and I walk through my walk, and know that this too shall pass, right? It's not going to stay like this forever. So that's my biggest thing. I would say when I plant in people's yards, one of their biggest things that they come to me with that is like a trigger for them is like, I need to create a space where I live that makes me feel whole when I go home. And I think it's really, really important, and something that we push aside way too much, is that where you live matters. Where you live matters. And if you just start with looking at that, do you feel stressed when you come home? Or do you feel like it's a place that actually feeds you and nurtures you and recenters you so that you can go out and be the best person and do the things that you need to do, be your whole self? So if I was going to start somewhere, I'd start with those two things. What are the things that really stop you in your tracks? And does your home make you feel safe and secure?
Beautiful. And judging from your background, it looks like you've done a wonderful job in manifesting that beautiful space for yourself. So for my next question, society has changed through time, and things that used to be very resilient are less resilient now, and things that were less resilient are far more resilient now. So I want to ask each of you, what do you think are some of the greatest resilient aspects of modern society? And I'll start with you, Greg.
Okay, so let me think how I can give a non-cynical answer. Let's see. And also not like a 4-hour dissertation. I don't know. It's like, it does seem like, sort of to Jeff's point, like where a lot of energy is directed right now are towards systems that don't seem to be very ecologically aligned. They don't really seem to be particularly human. They kind of seem impersonal and mechanical and sort of terrifying and eldritch a lot of the time. And I think, so something like a global pandemic that, altered shipping times and logistics and shut down, whole nations' economies. that was such a kind of touch point. Like when the COVID thing really first started and the quarantines were kind of at their most strict and like things were really grinding to a halt, it was like such a touch point into this, or not a touch point, maybe a kind of a lifting of the veil of like how fragile all of that stuff is. Like we rely on incredibly complex networks that require a whole lot of really complicated things to always go right. And like mostly they're not really things that are going to always go right. Like it's pretty insane that you can click a button on a thing that we have no idea how it works, can't repair, don't understand. It's sent to people we'll never meet in places that, you know, we have really no shared resources with. And then for like $1.40, like a plunger will come to your door. Like it's like all of that is so crazy the more that you dig into all of the pieces of that. One thing that, and not to go on crazy tangents, but like one thing is like for every YouTube video, for like every minute of a YouTube video, it's like the same thing as burning a light bulb for like 400 years or something like that. Like we have all of these systems that require a massive, massive, massive amount of energy. And we don't really see the consequences of any of this stuff. And so I think we've built these incredibly powerful systems that actively subvert the way that natural resilience would form, like versus something like a forest, which is incredibly complicated and incredibly complex, but like also pretty simple. Like it's like trees, and then there are more trees and there's shrubs, and it's, you know what I mean? It's that there's something so simple and kind of the more that you look into ecology or biology or kind of any of the natural sciences, it's fascinating how sophisticated and complex it is, but it's also always like really like, oh, right, of course that's how it works, right? Like it's never kind of, you never learn about the way that ecosystems interact and become terrified at like how inhumane and weird. And it's like, no, everything seamlessly integrates. So I think like, socially, we should be, obviously, I mean, we're all permaculturalists, so we believe this, but it's like, we really do have to look at how much of our social systems are externalizing all of these hugely important repercussions, like how much of these things that we take massively for granted are actively depleting other equally invisible, but also possibly and almost certainly more important systems, right? Like how does my, you know, whatever little piece of plastic, is that going to destroy whole swaths of forest? I think we have to start to kind of bring that more to presence of mind.
Beautiful. Shanti, what do you think are some of our greatest strengths in relation to diversity in modern culture?
By far the internet. You know, I think we're all relatively, some of you know, remember the days without the internet, right? You know, we're still on that generation that we know what it was like. And I think the interconnectedness and the capabilities that we have of learning from each other is just absolutely profound. I spent the last 2 weeks doing a lot of research outside of the United States and really touching base with a bunch of my friends who live all over the world. And to be able to do that so seamlessly, and for them to be able to walk me around their gardens and show me what the experiments they're doing and stuff, it is an amazing tool. Like absolutely profoundly amazing that we can range so far out of our own little network that we're in, that is like across the street from us, to be able to go across the world. And I think by far we as plant people, or we as resiliency people, we as permaculture people, we as sustainable agriculture people, or however that is, we can use that in such an amazing way like this today. So I really think, and I think we are using it, and I think we can do more, you know. So those are some of that for me is the biggest one.
Beautiful. Yeah, I think this call is a beautiful example of that. Even during the height of a global pandemic, we're able to gather here in this space and share this positive message on resiliency. Thank you. Jeff, what are your thoughts?
I definitely agree with Shanti about the internet. And I've been able to make connections with people all over the world. And it has benefited me and them at the same time. It's just an amazing, technology that we have. And one of the things I've noticed is that because the nutrients like have been lost from so many different things, from our food to also being a teacher and seeing the type of lessons that we teach and the benchmarks that we meet, and knowing that there's just so much more out there. I also think about the nutrients in our community in terms of resources and skills that have been lost that maybe are still there in some little village in the Amazon, or somewhere around. And that's the most amazing thing, and why I think there's something more to this universe and in our is the fact that these answers are still here. These solutions are embedded in nature. They're embedded in these cultures and people that we don't recognize. The idea in permaculture of valued the marginal and the edges. The fact that even though we have these complex systems of like Amazon.com bringing us things from China, it's a great way that these technologies have brought us so apart and they've separated us. But now we have this technology to bring things back and bring us all back together, and to get those resources and that knowledge back into our communities, so we can create that local network that maybe we just couldn't with the current people and the resources that we have in our hometown. So it's an amazing thing. And I think the fact that we have cities is something also to be celebrated. I think that you look anywhere where all the best technologies in philosophy and whatever that was created were often in areas where there was a lot of people with diverse ideas and just many people coming together. It's where the cities where a lot of culture and creativity are. And so we want to market that. I'm not going to be like Walden or someone going off and just being off grid by myself with my family. I know we can do it a better way by bringing people together, staying in the cities, but just having better designs and better systems where we can all be integrated together. I see microgrids with energy and water and food systems where it's all together, and just a different type of grid, like a smarter grid than we currently have. And with the cities and the internet, I think we can bring all that together. I love what's out there. The dysfunction makes me learn about how things should work and how things are supposed to be. And I love Monsanto. They taught me about how fertilizer should be done, how nutrient delivery. I wouldn't have thought about it if it wasn't for them really messing it up. I wouldn't have thought about herbalism. I wouldn't become an herbalist if I didn't realize how these drugs don't get to the root of the problem. There's no chemotherapy deficiency. It has to do with something else. And so the dysfunction in our society has brought me to who I am and what I've learned and the systems that I've been creating. So I see it in a positive way. I appreciate the modern world and what it has taught me.
I love bringing in technology and interconnecting it into the problems that we're facing. So instead of just outcasting it and instantly labeling all technology as bad. My next question is on climate change. So we're facing millions of climate refugees in the future. We're facing desertification of the planet. We're facing some pretty serious global issues. How do you see climate change affecting the needs within our communities in the future? And Jeff, we'll stay with you on this one.
I just saw the news this morning, and I saw that, I believe it was Guatemala and Honduras. There's about 8,000 people coming towards our border right now. And one of the things that we just have not really talked about, that this is a refugee, this is a climate crisis. This is why a lot of these people are coming. I did Airbnb for years, and I had a Guatemalan physician stay with me for a few weeks. And the biggest problem he had with the children was malnourishment, and the fact that whatever chemicals, modern solutions that they were using there have now got the system so where there's a lot of drought and famine in those regions, and those people are coming up here because they're not able to sustain their business as farmers and support their families and so on. So this is an issue that we're just not talking about. We're just building walls instead of trying to help support those people. And that is going to be a big problem for us. How do we become more resilient? How are we able to use resources when everyone wants to come here? That's one issue. But also in our communities, as we start growing food ourselves and harvesting rainwater and so on, we're really understanding that like there's something wrong. We're having issues with growing food that people who I've talked to lived here in Central Florida never had before. Our climate's becoming more bipolar. It's becoming too warm sometimes, and it's becoming too cold, and that's affecting the food supply. That's affecting the rainfall, and so it's those who are really directly connected to the earth, like we are, who are really feeling it and noticing it and realizing that something has to change. And so just trying to get that and try to communicate with people, like this is what's happening, and you don't notice this because you don't see those who are growing your food and those who are handling your water and your waste and so on. You just don't observe it and you don't see it because you're so far away from it. So I don't know. There's a lot to do, but I think that we're definitely online with creating the best solutions for people and creating systems that are going to be more regenerative. And the whole idea with the group that I'm with, Kiss the Ground, we're talking about how we can heal the planet by pulling that carbon dioxide out of the atmosphere and putting it into the earth and putting it into our trees and our plants and our food. And we can regenerate the soil, and we can pump gigatons of carbon dioxide out of the air just by doing these simple regenerative solutions. And I'm so optimistic about it. It really makes me smile and makes me happy knowing that we're part of the solution.
Wow, that is very exciting. And thank you for being a part of that project. I can't wait to hear more about it. Shanti, your thoughts?
So I think the good news is that life in general is very resilient. And especially like when I talk about life, I talk about like the world, the environment, the plants and everything. It's like amazingly resilient. There are so many solutions to how we can move forward. And even if we implement just a few of them, it's going to make huge leaps. The real catch is really focusing on them and giving them the opportunity to move forward. And I think we're doing that in some ways. And we also can obviously do a lot better. But I mean, I know a guy who can, he could fix red tide if he could get the right people to like give him some attention, right? So there's technology. We're combining these technology, the things that we do well. I just think that we've spent a lot of our like really big brain power on looking at other things like weapons and things that really are not, around climate change. So if we take some of that brain power and really focus it back, there's so many solutions already out there. They just need to be able to be put in front of the right person and get that attention. So we can do it. And there's so many possibilities. Bamboo alone is like one of the biggest things about it is like how much it could contribute to that. And that it's not the only one, and it shouldn't be the only one, right? There's so many different things and we should implement all of them.
I had a feeling you were going to bring up bamboo in that question. Thank you. Greg, your thoughts?
Yeah, scary. I think more than anything, I've really just had to develop a kind of a mindfulness practice around climate change because it's so kind of terrifying to me. I think everybody knows Rob Greenfield. The first time I ever talked to Rob, we talked about whether or not we had hope. And Rob was like, yeah, no, I don't really. I think kind of the earth is doomed, but I have to do what I can. And that's kind of where I'm at. Like, I do think that it's a really, really serious problem. And I also very, very firmly believe that the responsibility for the level of destruction is not really, that doesn't rest on kind of individual people. That rests on an incredibly small group of incredibly destructive corporations that basically have to stop what they're doing or everything else is kind of for naught. At the same time, like a lot of what you'll hear talked about in the news is kind of these big idea, super technical kind of innovations. We're going to build our way out of climate change. We're going to build carbon sequestration machines. We're going to do all this. We're going to deploy 8 bazillion gigajoules of solar in the next 5 years or whatever. And I think that really climate change is almost, and this is part of sort of what I've had to develop to sort of deal with my anxiety. Like in a lot of ways, I think climate change is literally a manifestation of our inability to just kind of chill out. I think we're more afraid to just slow down than we are to kind of create these unimaginably complex systems, right? Like the idea that our solution to climate change would be to build a machine that sucks carbon out of the air versus like just sort of settle down and like let trees grow. I think that's sort of where the issue is, right? Like what's hip, what's cool, what's exciting to politicians and visionary people are big flashy ideas. And insofar as it is going to require broad mindset change and sort of legislative, thing, that all for me, I believe, has to center around less. It's not about doing more. It's not about doing better. It's just literally less. Like we just have to settle down. We're not going to build a machine that sequesters carbon better than grasslands. We're not going to build a carbon machine that sequesters better than trees, better than bamboo, better than kelp forests in the ocean. We're not going to do it. Those things already exist. But the thing that does give me hope is that we basically obliterated the global ecology in like 100 years. So you think about the hundreds of millions of years that the Earth existed basically as a contiguous ecological system. It only took us 100 years to accidentally destroy that. Well, what that says to me is that humanity has immense, immense, immense power. So if we deliberately started thinking about things instead of just accidentally letting all this happen, if we actually put our attention on that, if it only took us 100 years to destroy it by accident, I don't think it'll take that long to repair it if we become serious about trying to repair it, because the solutions already exist. And it's mostly just letting natural functions happen. It's just like not actively destroying the checks and balances that create the climate in the first place.
Yes, I love that. The idea of recreating a tree in a carbon scrubber. Very, very beautiful analogy. Thank you. Thank you. I want to take the conversation to economics. And I've always seen economics as a wonderful meter and a way of establishing the success or the failure of a business or a system. How do you see resiliency affecting the field of economics, or vice versa? How do you see economics affecting resiliency in our future? And let's start with Shanti.
I knew you were going to pick me. Wow, the economy. Okay, that's something that's pretty far from like my area of expertise as a plant person. I think as plant people and as people who are kind of in this realm of things, like money is something that we get really afraid of, like in a lot of different ways. It's and it shouldn't be, because right, it's another tool for other things. And it's like you say, it can really it can also encourage people to do something for that reason, so as far as the economy and what it can do for us is we can start to monetize in a way things around, like for instance, climate change, which we've talked a lot about before, on bigger projects, because I mean, it's fine for you, me, and Jeff and Greg and Amy and like all of us to do our own little thing, but we're doing such a small little thing, right? And all of that trickles and it dominoes into the next thing. But if we really want to make big changes, we also need these bigger platforms to really come in, and things that we've talked about in the past, and I think we're going to see more of in the future, is really money being put towards things like regenerative agriculture, syntropic, permaculture, however you want to, the name that you want to use for that. But these ideas where farming is done in a way that is based around sustainability and regenerative, and it's done, and maybe it's only done that because there are economic incentives to do that. But that's where our economic incentives that we give a lot out, by the government for different things should be going. They should be going to these sustainable regenerative practices. And maybe it's starting with solar, and maybe it's ending up with syntropic planting in large scale farms. But, you know, to get away from the monocultures and the conventional and all these practices, we really need systematic ways that we can monetize that and encourage people who maybe, I mean, because it's so easy to do the same thing over and over again. We are patternizers from the very beginning. We learn, we do it this way, and then that's just the way we do it because that's the way it's always been done, right? And so getting somebody to change often takes an incentive to do that. And there's a lot of things that could be done to do that, you know, whether it's carbon credits or any other things that involve incentives that just help push that, just push that a little bit. And then once we do it, it's like, okay, this is the way we've always done it. We've always grown these crops together, and we've always done, you know, these kind of organic practices, and we've always made food this way, you know, like, why not? Like, we can just do it whichever way we want to. We can change things. We can change. We can be resilient. We can look at things differently. We can be creative around all these different things. But I do feel that putting that money behind it gives incentives and encouragement. And that should really be in the direction that we need to go, not just paying for people to do what they've always done.
Thank you. Greg, what are your thoughts on economy and resiliency?
Yeah, we hear like, so the news, like I listen to NPR sometimes, and there's like, what is it, Market Watch, whatever the show is, comes on like 5 o'clock, and the guy talks about the economy. And the thing that always kind of makes me chuckle is like at the end of the show, he'll talk about like the market is doing good, and he'll just say the market is up 3 points. And I'm like, what does that mean? What does that even mean, right? Like we use these words that most people have absolutely no idea what that's even an expression of. And like, so in the US, we use GDP as a measure for economic health. US GDP is $21 trillion a year, give or take, right? An unimaginable imaginary number, right? 21 trillion isn't real. There's not 21 trillion like any, I mean, that's insane. And despite the fact that we have unimaginable, like literally made up amounts of wealth, we have the highest prison population in the world. We have heart disease and lung cancer and suicide and opiate. We have like all of these problems. How could we have these problems in a society that also broadcasts this unimaginable wealth? Like how are we not taking care of people? And I think it's because GDP is basically a measure of extraction, right? It's a measure of how much we can suck out of the ground and out of the air and out of people and out of everything. Just suck. And to bolster these increasingly imaginary numbers. Like that's $21 trillion as an expression of things that were once actual resources, right? There was once oil in the ground, there was once ore in the ground, there was once trees in the forest. But those things don't have economic value. Those things are untapped potential. So we cut all that down and we burn it and we smash it and we rip it all apart, and then it becomes money. And then we have this incredibly powerful money system that has replaced what was actually real and tangible in the world, right? So if we just made the decision to base our economy on how resilient things were, on how circular things were, instead of extraction, right? Like what if our money was valuable based on how much good it did for people, right? Like what if our wealth was an expression of how happy people were, or how how secure people felt in terms of the resources they had access to? What if we used that? Because if we have already established that our money's not really based on anything except for a hypothetical, then can't we change what that hypothetical is? Like, why are we locked into this kind of idea of what it is currently? We can make an economy anything. It's just an expression of people's activities. So we change what those activities are. We should be able to create wealth around things that are far more meaningful than just extraction, and then kind of holding the product of that extraction in these giant vaults and letting dragons sleep on top of it and like kill the villagers, right? Like that's a bummer. That's no good for anybody. So I think it's like we just kind of have to start to reimagine what money is and why we have it, and what these systems exist for. And what they're supposed to exist for is to help us cooperate with each other, to help us facilitate projects that we want to do together, not to be the, money shouldn't be a license to live, right? It should just be something that helps you live, just like any other tool.
Beautiful. Thank you. Jeff, what are your thoughts?
Well, with money, I've thought about it a lot, and I've had different thoughts about it. But money's value, and it represents something of value, and so of course we do need to change our mindset. We need to change our value systems. We need to change the type of things that we value in terms of food and medicine and homes and community, and what are the solutions that we're turning to right now? Where are we putting our money? Where are we putting our time and resources? Because all of these companies, they operate off of our money. That's their food. Their species, just like any other species, I believe. Their bodies are made up of cells that are humans, and their fuel is and their energy is money and attention and relevancy. And so the thing is these things are going to die out once we stop giving them all of these resources that are ours. And so money is debt. It's think about how much money you have in a year for what you do, and that's the amount of money that represents the things, money. Just think about every item that you have and the stuff that you pay for your bills and your food and the services that you can't do yourself. And think about that money as debt. The amount of money that you need in a year represents the types of products and services that you're unable to either produce yourself, or you don't have any friends like Shanti's friends who are able to come over and help fix that gasket in the faucet, or something at the house. And so with these resilient permaculture networks that we're creating, it's about trying to have someone who can meet those needs, and maybe you trade or barter. There's time banks, there's other things that you can do to help trade value for value. When you look in the ecosystem, that's all it is. It's about plants trading carbon to the microbes, and they give them minerals in exchange. They don't have money. There's no money in nature, but there's always value, and there's stuff that represents value. And so when I look at the next phase of our country, of our nation, we had this period of extraction. The next stage is reintegration. It's going to be understanding that nature does these systems so much better than we do. Most of the craziness and the waste and everything comes out of our playing around with systems of food and waste and computers and computation, when our brains and our trees and our all of these natural solutions can do it so much better than we can. So now we're like, okay, all of the science is showing that these things are so amazing. Let's start reintegrating these natural technologies, these eco designs back into our society and see what we get. It's going to be a beautiful marriage of man-made technology with nature technology. And that's what we do as permaculturists. We're trying to reintegrate those systems. And so ultimately, hopefully we won't be needing as much money. We're going to need each other more. We're going to need the plants more, need the soil more. But it takes money for people to do this, to make those systems and to get that reintegration back together. So there's a lot of money that's going to be changing hands, but they're going to give it to Greg instead of their typical lawn care company. They're going to be giving it to Shanti for a tea instead of a pharmaceutical drug that never gets to the root of the problem. That $3.5 trillion of the healthcare system, 90% for chronic conditions that we have the solutions to in the herbal and community. The pesticides, the herbicides. Greg, Terry, you guys have the solution to those things to build soil organic matter faster than it can be done naturally, to regenerate the health of the gut faster than it could be done naturally if we target nature and use it in a very specific way. We can restore things just as fast as we destroyed them. And I think the money is going to come to us once that mindset starts to realize, oh my gosh, I can heal myself naturally. I can heal the earth. I can hear my grow food in my garden. I'm also part of the Bionutrient Food Association. They're creating a meter with a smartphone. You can just shine it on some fruits and vegetables, and it'll tell you, compared to like the 1,000 farms that they visited, where the nutrient content falls on that spectrum. And so if you shine it on there and you're like, this carrot has the polyphenols or the antioxidants that's closest to like the best sample that they collected, then I'm going to want that carrot. I'm going to want that, and I'm going to pay whoever is out there who can get that carrot, because I know that that's going to make me healthy. And so we're going to be using science, we're using technology, but that's what it really takes, is people are going to have to see that these solutions are better, that I don't want to use the word Trump, but they outweigh anything that's out there right now. And it's that the money's going to come our way, and we're going to look at money completely differently, because we're using it to improve the world, our lives, and bring everything together. So I love money. It's just like anything. It could be used the right way. It could be used the wrong way.
And that's an actual wonderful segue into our final question, which is health and wellness. Jeff, you had mentioned herbalism, and Greg, you had mentioned measuring our levels of happiness. So I wanted to ask you, Jeff, how do you see resiliency playing a role in the health and happiness of our communities in the future?
Sure. Well, we're a lot of people are talking about, and they put a lot of focus into their cars and into the health of maybe their computer and all these other things, but it's their own bodies that they really know very little about. We don't have an instruction manual. We don't have the type of things that we do for all of these other gadgets and things of how to keep ourselves healthy. And what I've been learning a lot over the past few years is how to create a regenerative body. Our immune system in particular is something that, if we give it the right types of nutrients and we avoid the foods that have certain toxins, we can create the best type of immune system that can be resilient against viruses, against bacteria. And it's something in a future talk I'm going to be doing called Your Inner Mask. It's there is this barrier that will help keep things out. And we have it inside of us, and we can unlock that potential. And there's ways to regenerate it, because we've been damaged. There's lots of holes, and we're letting these things in. And so the health, knowing that 90% of the $3.5 trillion budget that we have is for chronic conditions that the typical healthcare industry or sick care industry cannot fix. They just put you on these subscription plans. And so in the herbal community, and with the type of solutions that we're creating as permaculturists, we're creating the conditions, we're creating the context for health to happen, for it to thrive. And one thing I noticed is also about stress. Stress can really affect your health. And so stress is just prolonged stress. Anxiety is the inability to be able to handle the challenges and the problems that we have today. And so trying to create better community systems where we come together and we're able to help each other out really affects the health of our communities and our families. And so I see where this idea of resiliency and the type of things that we're doing are ultimately going to help people just be healthy in the long term.
Thank you. Greg, how do you see resiliency affecting the health and happiness of our communities?
Well, almost everything that I know about regenerative health is something that I've heard Jeff talk about. So he's definitely the expert here. I am sort of notoriously less focused on my own health than probably I should be. But I can talk about kind of the mental health thing. I think that we are tremendously stressed out because we're sort of having to live in these ways that are like deeply unnatural, right? Like even right now, like I can't go to bed when the sun goes down and get up when the sun comes up, right? So that's offsetting a circadian rhythm. you're getting in a car and going at really, really high velocities. You're sitting down all day. We're, you know, eating these foods that are too soft for our palates. We're doing all of this stuff that's kind of all to enable a lifestyle that's just go, 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 right? Like we, you know, you have 30 minutes for breakfast, and then you have, you know, 15 minutes for lunch. And then we, you know, I saw it like a tweet the other day, I think that was, what was it? It's like, looking forward to getting the chance to look at the big screen after spending all day staring at the medium screen so that I can then stare at the small screen until I go to sleep. And it's like, we have these like, these opposite of systems, right? That are just like, we are living in these deeply unhealthy ways. And not to like continuously beat that horse, but I do think it all comes back to this kind of like, what are we trying to accomplish? Like, why are we living like that? Like, what are we gaining by sacrificing that health? And I think in a lot of cases, the answer is probably nothing. And I know for me, for years, I never even paused to think about that. And it's something I continuously have to remind myself. It's like, okay, well, why am I going so hard right now? Like, what am I even trying to do? Am I just kind of trying to block out the howling void in my own soul? You know what I mean? Like, or are we doing things that nourish us and kind of feed our spirits and everything? I can't speak to the biofilm barriers in our guts and everything nearly as much as Jeff can. Although when you finish that talk, I'm looking forward to hearing it, because every time you talk about any of that stuff, it blows my mind fully. But I do think in terms of trying to find happiness and trying to find peace, it's just taking a second. It's slowing down. It's prioritizing and being intentional instead of just kind of running and going with a flow and a beat that we didn't even set for ourselves.
Thank you. Thank you. And Shanti, would you like to give us our final words on happiness and health?
Wow, that sounds like a big responsibility. So I would just say there's a couple of things that come to mind. One is as a parent, I think a lot of parents can relate to this, and I run into a lot of parents who are struggling with this, is we have this it's cultural, but it's learned, and it's important for the survival of our kids, but we do a self-sacrifice thing that becomes, we get so good at it that we stop taking care of ourselves. And so one message that I try to remind myself of and to remind others of is, who do you think's gonna run this train if you're not here running it? Because believe me, all these systems that are in place are going to come to a screeching halt if you're not taking care of yourself in order to facilitate all these, you know, balls that you're juggling up in the air. And if that's the only reason you take one step in taking better care of yourself, or one step to go do something that helps nourish yourself, that helps feed yourself, that helps keep yourself happy, do it for that as a parent, you know, because there are so many people relying on you. And if you're not there taking care of it and being able to do it in a coming from a place of happiness and well-being, at least to the best of your ability, or at least somewhat to the best of your ability, as best as you can do, you know, it's going to affect everybody. And that's really important, because as humans, we always do this thing. Like, I have a problem with you, but I don't actually address that problem with you. So then I push it on to somebody else. We triangulate things all the time. And if we can just get a handle on being more within ourselves and acknowledging that, and figuring out our own happiness, and doing things and hiring people and putting that money where it goes, and getting people to help us in whatever that way that is, whether it's, you know, having body work or you know, or food and all these things that Jeff talks about, like, or living in a space that regenerates who you are and helps you feel more well-being. Because I'm really concerned about mental health right now, especially what I see happening in teenagers and younger kids and younger kids. And it's really, really terrifying to me. And I just want to give them all like a big collective hug, because I just love my teenagers and 20-year-olds and something so much. And I just want to tell them it's going to be okay, because they're really suffering. And a lot of it has to do with the things that are so great about this internet and also so terrifying about it. It's this movement towards not being able to discern the difference between external reality and being on a screen. And that's blurring so much that it's really damaging their ability to be happy and feel that sense of security and well-being. And so we also need to think about that. What are the things that we can showcase in ourselves for these kids so that they can get tools around things? And I mean, some of these tools are just really simple. Like Greg talks about, it's like, just go be outside. Just go be outside. That can be enough, right? And taking these steps that help us reintegrate back into an environment, a natural environment, even if it's only for 20 minutes a week, even if it's only for 5 minutes a day, and allowing those things to help us find happiness. Because this chronic sadness in our society is going to kill us faster than climate change. And it is a really important thing to address, but it's all connected. So I really feel strongly about these things. And Jeff can talk to you all day long about like the nutrients and things and how they affect your hormones and how they're affecting what you're thinking about. And these are all really, really valid things. So take one step to take care of yourself, because you taking care of yourself showcases to other people to take care of themselves. And it also helps you to just be a better person and just showcase that. And be more resilient in things when other people are not in a good place, right? I think the best way to look at that is like when you come up against a person who's really not doing well, and you can have the ability to not go there with them, but to hold a space that maybe reflects something different back to them. And we're running into this a lot now. So it's really important to find those tools that we have to be able to hold that space and hold that energy and be the people we want to be so that we can be there for other people who aren't feeling it right now. And believe me, when you're not feeling it and you're acting like that, like, you don't want to act like that. We've all been there. We've all acted like that. It's all been a horrible experience, and we kick ourselves afterwards and like, oh my God, why did I do that? But you know, it happens. This is what we do, right? So the gift of being able at that moment to not go there with that person can be one of the biggest gifts we can give to the world. So whatever you have to do to try and get more of that in your life, do it.
Thank you. And I am giving you the biggest virtual hug right now. Thank you very much for sharing. All three of you are wonderful inspirations in your community. You've all been wonderful leaders in both permaculture and just the community at large. So I wanted to say thank you all for being here and sharing your thoughts on resiliency. I wanted to ask if there's a way to get in touch with each of you, either your contact and how we could learn more about the projects you're working on. And we'll start with you, Greg.
Yeah, so the easiest thing is to go to connectedlandscapes.com. I've got all my social stuff on there. I'll have some more details on the projects I've been working on there soon. And I always say this, nobody ever does it, but if you want to just reach out for whatever reason to talk about the economy or plants or whatever, feel free to do it. I'm very available. And then also, we talked about a lot of things. Almost everything I said was parroting things that I've heard on a podcast called Team Human with Doug Rushkoff. I feel like I owe it to all of the people that have been on that podcast to say that, like, yeah, mostly I just regurgitate things that much smarter people have said that I remember. So if any part of this connected with you, I definitely recommend that, because it's some pretty mind-blowing stuff. And they even talk about permaculture sometimes.
Wonderful.
Thank you, Greg. Shanti, how do we get in touch with you and learn more about what you're doing?
So sweet. Thank you. So I have, my website is bambooleaftea.com. I'm on Instagram and Facebook at bambooleaftea and at Shanti Bamboo. And then also, I also want to put a plug in for the American Bamboo Society. And I've restarted the Florida Caribbean chapter. And every month we do a hands-on workshop, the third Saturday of the month. And you can become a member by going to bamboo.org. So really good people with great information, factual information, that have been doing this for a really long period of time. If you're interested in learning more about bamboo, please take a look at them.
Thank you. Thank you so much for sharing with us. And Jeff, how do we learn more about the exciting projects you're working on, and how do we get in touch with you?
I am part of Orlando Permaculture. You can go to orlandopermaculture.org. We also have a Instagram page, Facebook forum that is just filled with a lot of wonderful people and exchanging ideas. And we also have monthly meetings every second Tuesday evening at Audubon Park Covenant Church. We just recently had a drive-in feature of the film Gather, which went really well. And we do have a Yummy Yams event coming up in February. We're going to be able to go out into a nature preserve and harvest. Last year, we got about 300 pounds of wild yam, and we cooked some of it up. And so you will be able to take some home and enjoy the yam with your family. And also you can reach me at Nature Hacker, Instagram and YouTube. I try to help people with integrating natural systems into their lives. These nature hacks will make your life more efficient and healthier and happier. And I have some future projects I can't wait to share, but I just have to wait. You're gonna have to ask me about it to reach out.
Well, thank you so much for joining us today. And thank you everyone for making time for us and for the community. If you want to share with us your biggest takeaway from the class, we'll have a post on our Facebook community group. And there we can answer each individual question you might have. There's a new post there now, and please share with us your thoughts on the class. I want to thank Amy Zelt for helping produce this class and for making all the technical magic happen. Thank you very much. If you got anything from this class, there's a donate button right below in the link, and please donate, as it helps keep our channel going. Please subscribe, as it really helps us out, and it's completely free for you. I believe that the resiliency of a system is directly related to the amount of diversity and the amount of love within it. When we're all interconnected with the 3 permaculture ethics, that's the care for each other, the care for the earth, and a fair distribution of our surplus, we create and nurture thriving communities. So I'm very happy to be part of this community with you all, and I'm very happy that you are all joining us in this important work, and look forward to seeing you next week. Have a wonderful time. Bye. Thank you everyone for being part of this panel. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so
Thanks for
much.
having me.